Okay, good morning or good afternoon, depends on where you are. So welcome to the STR divisions. This is Stronger Together Meet the Scholar series. And today we are very honored to have Professor Tsui with us to share with her insights and experience with all of us. And then thanks, Anne. I am Guoli Chen. So I'm going to be the moderator for this session because I'm the executive committee of the STR division. And this is a true team effort. And first, thanks Samina Karim for her great initiative to set up this whole series of sessions. And I'm also assisted by Shelby Guy. So she's going to join Michigan State after this summer, and also and assisted by Jiao Luo. So please allow me to spend a few minutes to have a quick introduction of Anne and also highlight several of her achievements in the past. Anne is the adjunct distinguished professor at the University of Notre Dame. She's also the Motorola Professor Emerita of International Management at Arizona State University. And concurrently, she's also the visiting distinguished professor at Peking University and Fudan University of China. Previously, Anne was at Duke University, UC Irvine, and also in the mid-90s, she was a professor at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and received her PhD in management from UCLA, and she also received the honorary doctorate in the economics from University of St. Gallen, Switzerland. She made huge contribution to our community and was the 67th president and also the fellow of Academy of Management. And she's also the editor of the Academy of Management Journal, MJ, our flagship journal. She's also the fellow of the AIB, Academy of International Business. In addition to that, she's the founding president of IACMR, International Association for Chinese Management Research, and she's also the founding editor-in-chief of Management Organization Review. In recent years, Anne started a mega project. This is the global initiatives on responsible research in business and management. So later, if we have time, we will get back to a couple of questions related to this RRBM. And I'm going to highlight some of the awards and recognitions. It's going to be a long list, so I'm just going to select some of them. So Anne's research has received the Best Paper Awards from AMJ, SQ, and Journal of Management, and also from the Center for Creative Leadership and Applied Leadership Research Award. She also received the University of Minnesota Outstanding Alumnus Achievements Awards, and due to his humongous contribution to the AOM, she also received the AOM Distinguished Services Contribution Award and also the IACMR Lifetime Contribution Awards. So in terms of the research impact, you can see that her paper and articles has received more than 35,000 Google citations. Clearly shows he's extremely influential for his societies and her research. And her research topic is pretty wide, and recently she worked on the topics like executive leaderships and income inequality in the organizations. And in those early days, she worked on demographic diversity, employment relationship. She also worked on managerial and human resource unit effectiveness. And she also worked on the cross-national, cross-culture topics like Guanxi Network. And she's also an expert in the Chinese management research. So I'm going to have this like very quick introductions, and then allow that we have around about like 100 minutes or 90 minutes to have a conversation with Anne. First, thanks, Anne. Thank you so much for being with us, spend your time and share the insights with us. Before I do that, let me close the,
Wally?
let me close, yes.
Can I just ask, we actually didn't see the slide with the bullet points. You said them all very eloquently though, but maybe you could show us that slide since this is being recorded and others could view what you just said. If you go forward, if it allows you to.
This is the slides, am I right?
We only see the first slide with a very nice picture of Anne, but not the bullet points that you had mentioned.
It's interesting because from my screen it looks like I'm in the second slides. You can only see the first slides.
Yes, maybe stop sharing screen and go to that slide and then share screen. We may be able to see it.
Okay, let me. Let me do it again. Sorry.
No problem. I just want to make sure people can read all the wonderful things that we highlighted about Anne.
Yes. Can you see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay, let me.
So maybe we can leave this up for 5 minutes and then we can, Shelby can stop sharing the screen so you don't need to worry about it.
Is the slides okay? No. Okay, great. You know, this is sometimes the issues that we face when we teach online, and then students will say, hey, where's the slides? And okay, good. So this is just one slide, and then I try very best to put it in just into one slide because there's so many things that we can talk about, and she make a huge contribution to our fields and to lots of services, not only in the traditional community of its longest history like the AOM. She's also the founding members of the ISMR and do lots of the global initiatives. So here is the major bullet points. So shall I maybe stop sharing and then get into the session? Okay. So we will talk about who you are and also your scholarship and your contribution to our field, and also the evolution of your research and career trajectory, and also your insights to share with us. So this is a great opportunity for us. It's not only about read your paper, but also we want to know a little bit more about you. So I very appreciate these opportunities to know you in person. So let me stop the slide sharing and okay. So before we start the conversations, let me set a couple of rules for this Zoom meeting. So in the first about 50 to 60 minutes, and I will interview Anne, and then we have this conversation. So if you can unmute you can mute yourself in the first like 50 minutes, that will be great. And then after that, we are going to open to the all for this like Q&A sessions. But if you have questions, you can always put your question on the chat box so that we can keep tracking what kind of questions you have. Since when we get into the second part of the sessions. Okay, so thank you so much again. Really appreciate your time. Can we have this conversation now? Yeah, so Anne, could you say something so that
yes,
make sure that
yes,
we can see you?
yes, I'm ready.
Okay, great.
I'm ready.
Great, so thank you so much. So I'm going to start with the first question, which is related to your past. So we really hope to know more about you, your past, and then where did you grow up and where are you now? And what kind of lifetime events really trigger you, have a big influence in you and choose this academic path?
Wow, there's a lot of questions in there. Okay, well, before we begin, I want to first of all thank the Strategy Division for the invitation. This is very special for me. As you know, I am not really in strategy. I'm an OBHR researcher, And my contribution to the strategy field is really very, very peripheral. And hopefully my latest work will have some contribution. But I'm an outsider. Because of that, I feel extra special to be invited. So I want to thank all of you, especially Samina, for all your great work. Your team told me that you're the brain power behind the whole program. So I really want to thank you. And thank you, Guoli, for getting up so early, 6 o'clock in Singapore. And also Shelby and Zhao for your help with this session. So I think this project is so special. I sat in on a few already, and I think that it's wonderful to be able to hear very distinguished, successful scholars on how they approach their career, how they started, and on and on. It's inspiring for me. I'm sure it's inspiring for young people. And I wish I had something like this when I was a doctoral student, and that was many, many years ago. So time has changed. So we have this technology that makes it possible for us to do a lot more sharing than we could otherwise. So sorry for this long-winded preamble into answering your long questions. I'll try to maybe break up into little pieces so that we can have a little kind of a digest in between. So I guess you want to know how I get started. It's been a long time ago, so I'll try to recall. I was born in a small village in Shanghai. It's a small farming village, and it's now part of the metropolitan city of Shanghai because it's grown so much in the last 40 years due to the economic reform. But I was born there, and my mother and my father met when she was 16. And they both were not high school graduates. My mother had a junior high education. My father is a high school dropout. But they met at age 16 and fell in love, got married at age 17, and age 18, I was born. So that was pretty quick. And then 3 years after they were married, communism, the regime change happened and communism took over. So my father had to leave Shanghai, left behind mother and me. So my mother and I, we moved from the city of Shanghai where she grew up. She's a city girl. And we moved to the farming village with my father's mother, my paternal grandmother. And my mother instantly became a farmer. So she had to get up really early in the morning to fertilize and water and harvest the vegetables and then go to the market to sell them before it's dawn. And my job, I had a job. My job was to help her with picking out the worms from the cabbages using a pair of chopsticks. I was about 5 or 6 years old at that time. So that particular experience, well, I hated very much these worms, but I learned, working is normal and getting up early to work, that's just part of life. And I learned hard work from my mother. So it was very, very influential for me to realize later on where I got this workaholism is from my mother. All right. But I want to go on a little bit more because of how I left China and then eventually come to the US. China had closed its borders, so nobody, except in very special circumstances, nobody could leave China. But we had a police officer in our village. He took pity on me and mother because just the two of us. He knew my father was away already. So he managed to get a permit for us to leave Shanghai. So we took the train, went down to Guangzhou, and went down to Macau. And in Macau, my mother, we met a lady from Hong Kong. She came to bring me into Hong Kong on an overnight boat ride as if I was her daughter. And my mother went on a fishing boat separately. So the next morning, she brought me to my maternal grandmother's place in Hong Kong. And then 3 days later, my mother arrived. We really didn't know whether she would make it or not, but she did. So that experience really was very important for me because it taught me not to be afraid of new things, strangers, and also taught me that there are lots of good people like that lady. I mean, I felt really indebted to her for doing that. So it taught me about good people, good outcomes could happen. And so it instilled this sense of optimism in me, which is really a very big part of me today, okay? So Another thing growing up important for me is that we were very poor in China, of course, and also in Hong Kong. So my mother would do handwork, handcraft in Hong Kong. She was farming in Shanghai, and I was always her assistant. So I helped her with handcraft while we were in Hong Kong. So that experience taught me that work is a very natural part of life. So I felt like I was just born to work. and also my mother turned out to be, she was a very diligent, very quiet, just accepting the life as was given to her. And I also learned survival skills, adaptation skills. And I was the only child, so I learned to be independent. And all of these adjectives describe me today, and they really influence how I live my life. So my long answer to your question of how I grew up is that I grew up both in Hong Kong and Shanghai with uneducated parents and in poverty. But I didn't know that we were poor. And that is important because I didn't know that we were poor because everybody around me was poor. I just thought everybody's like that. So that poverty did not handicap me. And I think one important thing it did for me is that I'm really easily satisfied. I don't need a lot of money to keep me happy. So that's how I grew up to be independent, and work is just normal part of life. Okay. So you want me to go on?
Thanks. Thank you so much. And really, really appreciate share with your early childhood experience with us. I think first is that family education is always the first education, and then the place and then the lives that we had experienced in those early days actually have a big impact of our trajectory in the future. I really, really appreciate your very honest sharing with all your experience with us. Thank you so much. So maybe next will be go back to, let's get back to maybe the more academic side a little bit. And then so once you get into the US and then broadly, how did you find this PhD program and then start your PhD journey?
Okay, so I got my bachelor's at Duluth, Minnesota, and then I got my master's in Minneapolis. After I finished my master's degree, I was working in this company called Control Data Corporation. I was really pretty happy. And the Control Data had a very strong human resource department. There were lots of PhDs working there. Most of them were IO psychologists from UM, Minnesota. So as I was working, interacting with them, I was humbled and I was inspired. I felt like maybe I should get my PhD too. Then I can be as smart as they, and also provide better service to the managers I was working with. So I decided. So yeah, I go again. I asked my manager whether I could take a leave to go to get my PhD, and I will come back to work. So they said, yeah, sure, we'll keep you on the payroll. You can come back with part-time, and then when you're done, you can come back. So I went to UCLA. At UCLA, after first year, I felt deeply, deeply in love. Not with anybody, but with research. I've loved research so much that after I finished my PhD in third year, I said, I really want to do this full time. I just don't think I want to go back to Control Data. So I talked to my manager at Control Data, Joe McGregor, and said, Joe, I think I'd like to try to be a university professor. What do you think? He said, well, that's what you want to do it. So he said, and if you don't find it, satisfying, whatever, you can always come back. So with that encouragement, then I decided to find an academic job. But there's another second reason for that I became an academic and get onto my PhD. And that is I was thinking to myself, I said, if I go back to work for a company, I'll be helping the people in one company, about 40, 50,000 people. But if I'm a professor and a researcher, I can potentially help so many more people. And I can have so much more impact than I would if I work for one company. So that's how I decided that I would do that. And my friends actually were trying to persuade me not to do that. I said, well, you'll be poor. You professors make very little money compared to business. So, you know, I didn't even think about that. It doesn't matter how much money I make. I'm sure they pay enough for me to buy groceries. So that's not an issue at all. So that's how I end up becoming a professor with my PhD. Now I am a professor my whole life and never regretted my decision. So.
Very, very interesting experience. So I don't know what this is like a norm back to like early 80s or end of the 90s, 70s, because nowadays our norm is like after you get a PhD degree and then you're supposed to be a professor in a university, right? It looks like, and I write that back to late 1970s or early 1980s, such a norm, like PhD degree getting the university professor may not be so strong at that point of time. It's how often, like for instance, like back to early 1980s, how often that the PhD graduates actually get into the industry, work in the industry?
It's more often than now. Especially the cohort that I was benchmarking myself to, they were from psychology. As you know, psychology, especially IO psychology, many of them go to work in industry. So that's pretty typical. And when I was a student at UCLA, we had a very small program, and most of them did go into academia. Yeah, but I have to say, the desire to work in business was not a bad thing in those days. That you were not punished for doing that. So.
Yeah, especially from the money's perspective. Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. So the next questions will be related to your dissertation topic. So how did you get this idea or the research questions that you think that you are going to invest at least 2-3 years for your dissertation? So yes. How did you get these ideas? How did you get the research questions for your dissertation?
Right. Well, as I mentioned, I was working in control data before I went to get my PhD. So that my work experience clearly influenced what I thought about as potentially topics to research on. So when I was working control data, because I worked with so many managers, I was actually very impressed by the manager job. I thought managers are so important people. And to me, they're more important than technicians, anybody else in the sector, because they manage people. Each manager, and I was doing calculations, each manager managed 10 people, 100 managers manage 1,000 people. And these 1,000 employees, their livelihood, their well-being, their performance is under the influence of these 100 managers. So I also noticed there are some managers that have a strong positive reputation for being a good manager, others are not so much. Then furthermore, I noticed the middle managers in particularly had a really difficult job because they had to please the boss, they manage their people, they have to work with peers. So all of that was in my head as I entered the PhD program. And by the time I need to choose a topic, I already knew I want to study managers. I mean, that's no question. So no matter what I read, nothing kind of perked my interest. I wanted to study managers, especially the middle managers. So the question is, how do I study it? And then I was really lucky. I met a professor of economics. His name is Bill Ochi, actually. And I was explaining what I wanted to study. And I said, would you be my chair? And he said, Anne, you are not economist. If you want me to be your chair, you have to take 3 years of economics. And I said, Professor Ochi, I'm not sure I want to do that. He said, well, in that case, you go read this book. So he told me to read this book called Social Psychology of Organizations by Carson Kahn. So I read it cover to cover, and then I discovered this role set theory. Now the role set theory really is like light bulb, just lit up. Of course, it's obvious. Managers is a role, and they're in the role set. There are role centers around them. each role center are in their own jobs. They have their own expectations, demands. It gets pretty complicated receiving a role. So I use that role set theory, try to estimate, come up with a model on how managers can be effective with all three groups. And that becomes my dissertation topic. And it's called a Roadside analysis of managerial reputational effectiveness. So that's how I come to the, so it's a phenomenon in a company that I was intrigued, and I just, you know, wanted to understand that problem. So I did it.
So can I say, broadly speaking, that your research question is driven from literally the business problems or business questions, right? From the phenomenon.
Absolutely. I am a phenomenon-driven researcher, and I am what we call contextually sensitive, okay? So in other words, I pay attention to what's going on in the world outside my ivory tower. So I look around, see what are the problems that interest me or important. If I'm interested, I go after them. I never go to the literature to look for questions because I don't want to, like Kuhn said, mop up somebody else's problem. They don't want to, you know, I like to find my own problems, find my own solutions. And so I always do that. And I never worry about whether or not that topic is publishable. I figure academic freedom, we're supposed to be free to choose problems that's important and interesting to us. And so and that's what I do. So with that, my second project actually after dissertation is that because I work in the human resource department, and I know human resource department is also one of those departments have a tough time getting to be known to be, you know, a sort of a with high reputation and prestige. So I want to study how can they gain a positive reputation in the company. So that became my second dissertation topic. And I can go on. You want me to go on? I can tell you my third topic. So should I?
Sure, please. Yeah. So you have like 3 essays for your dissertation?
No, I have
okay.
I have one dissertation, but it's a really good data set. So the dissertation was done in control data. So I have a really good data set and I write several papers from it. So I'm one of those, one big data set, write multiple papers, but each paper is different. So
I see.
I
see.
Yeah.
That's great.
So,
Thanks.
so yeah, if I may, I want to tell you about my relational demography research, which is also phenomenon driven because in that year, in the 80s, there was a lot of attention in business to affirmative action, diversity training, it's really hot. And also in the literature, in the field, there are people writing, people like Don Hambrick, Jeff Pfeffer, Susan Jackson, they were writing about demography in organizations. So there seems to be this academic research attention, there's something going on in the world. And it just dawned on me that my dissertation data set has data on demographics between supervisors and subordinates. So I could actually investigate how employees feel or react to situations as more or less diversity. So I work with, that happened to be at Berkeley so I talked to Charles O'Reilly who's there. So we worked on this project and very luckily we got this paper published in AMJ. And then I also realized that I have a second project on human resource effectiveness. And that particular project also has a very big data set as well. And it's a unit level. So I said, we can study this relational demography idea that we wrote in the AMJ paper at the unit level as well. So that's what we did. And that paper got published in ASQ 92. 5 years later, that paper got the ASQ award. So that was very lucky. 2 really good papers came from data I already have, but it's on a phenomenon that's important in society at that time. And also in the field, we are paying attention to that question. So that's just.
Yeah, so that is one of the most cited paper, right? The relational demography.
Yeah.
And so if I ask you like, which projects or which papers that you feel most proud of, and then if you want to cite yourself, and then which paper would you consider as the one that, especially for the junior scholars, that we should read?
Oh, that you should read. Yeah, some of the paper you shouldn't read. So I have my share of papers that I wish I didn't spend as much time on, but I try not to do that. I really try not to do that. Besides the relational demography paper, I think the paper in AMJ 1997 on employee organization relationship, that's the one I feel very, very good about as well. And that's also a phenomenon-based research. And that paper came about when I was at UC Irvine with Lyman Porter and John Pierce. It was in I got there in 1988. And then we would meet regularly to talk about what's going on in the world, what's going on with the field. And we were discussing all these major corporate restructuring happening in the late 1980s. I mean, you're too young to know that. But in the late 1980s, there's major corporate restructuring. IBM, General Electric, Hewlett Packard, all these great companies are laying off middle managers by the thousands. But at the same time, they also say with hard times, we need you to actual commitment to the company. So we were just intrigued, how can companies laying off people at the one hand and say, well, work harder, so that's kind of one way, expecting commitment, but not giving commitments to employee in return. So we wanted to study that phenomena. And then we applied for an NSF grant, and we got an NSF grant. And then we had 10 companies, a really good data set as well. So the paper was sent to AMJ, and there's kind of a little review story. That you sometimes get lucky, sometimes you have to persist. 3 reviewers, one reviewer hated it through 2 revisions. From beginning to end, won't change. The other 2 reviewers come around. And the editor was Angelo Denisi, and he decided to take a chance with our paper, so he accepted it. And that paper was published in 1997. And as you know, it won the 1998 Best Paper in AMJ Award. So up to today, I don't know who's the reviewer that rejected the paper. I would have loved to find out, but I guess that person probably forgot.
Yeah. So which means that
paper,
we need to be very persistent. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. We need to be very, very persistent for our profession, right?
And we also need good editors who are willing
good editor,
take risks.
Supportive.
Yeah, some editors are not risking. They want to have everybody to sign on before they accept the paper. Yeah.
Take the judgment call and
exactly.
Be open-minded. So go back to the the key points that you mentioned about this phenomenon-driven, and then so it's going to lead you to find the new projects and new ideas. And I have 2 related questions, and one is especially for some of our junior colleagues, right? So on the one hand, we think, okay, this is we talk about phenomena. We're at the business school.
Right.
We can get the idea. On the other hand, it's about the literature review, and then so my first question is how do you think about the function or value of the literature review in the research process? Like, when you write the paper, when you come up with the idea? This is the first question. The second is, if the phenomenon is one of the major drivers for you to find out the ideas, and then how does that phenomenon actually drive or influence your career trajectory?
Okay. First question, the importance of the role of literature review. The literature basically is our body of knowledge, what we know about organizations and management today. It tells you what we have learned in the past, okay? So you go to literature to learn what kind of questions have we studied, what theories there are to answer those puzzles, and what are possible gaps in knowledge, right? Yeah. So that sort of literature is important for us to prepare us to add to the literature. The second piece of literature review is when you have a problem you want to study, okay? The other day, Don Hambrick said, he looked at the problem, he defined his question, he literally does not look at the literature. I'm the same way, okay? I like this question, I like this problem. I try to figure it out, is it interesting? Is it important? I mean, I have a theory, but I wanted to know the answers to that, okay? And I'm convinced this is an important problem. Then I go to the literature to find out what we didn't know about that already, okay? If there's already answer, I'm happy with the answer that's given, no need to do research, go on to a second topic, right? So So in other words, literature review is not, for now, I'm afraid many students are taught to go to literature to look for problems to work on. And I really have a very strong feeling, especially now after the pandemic, with all the changes happening in the last 20 years, I think the literature is very outdated in terms of problems and theories. I know I'm already saying very strong things. We have some newer literature. I'm not saying for the last 10 years. So I'm saying anything older than 10 years, 20 years ago is very old. But we're still using some of these old theories. And I'm not sure that they apply to the problems of today. So I think the phenomenon base, because there's so many problems in the world that we need to study, new problems, right? So therefore, we gotta start from the world and then say, all right, let's look at the literature, see what we know. And I bet you, you're not gonna find many answers for the problems of today, because all these problems today are very new in nature. So that's the first question. So being phenomenon driven, how does have evolved my research trajectory? That's the question, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I already gave you some examples, my dissertation, to my child unit work, and then to my relational demography, and then up to the employee organization relationship. So all of those are phenomenon based. None of those ideas came from the literature, right? So now the next two stages, actually, the context will make even more influence on how my career evolved, actually. So the next stage actually is around mid-1995. I was asked to go to Hong Kong to build a management department at the new university there. You mentioned HKUST. So I went, and being in Hong Kong, I instantly become sensitive to what we are teaching, what we're doing research on, what's happening in China. So my research began to look at Chinese phenomena. So I started to work on Chinese guanxi, social networks in China, Chinese guanxi, and I started looking at executives in China. And the reason I look at executives in China is because the Chinese economic reform, the main driver was the private enterprises. So there were just so much private, they were like contributing 60, 70, 80% of GDP growth. And there were just so many thousands and thousands of new enterprises. They're all SMEs, right? So everyone has an SEO. And so I'm intrigued. I say, who are these people? What are they like? How do they behave? How do they lead? How do they manage that counter for the success of the private sector in China? So I started, looking at the CEOs. And at the same time, I also continue to work on employee relationships, because that also happened to apply pretty well to the Chinese firms as well. So I have students working on dissertation topics on EOR, working on executive leadership, personality, and so forth. And so my research in the years after Hong Kong, from Hong Kong on, it's mostly Chinese context research. But that's my research. Now I'm going to go to my institutional building work. That's very much context inspired. So when I was in Hong Kong, I noticed that in mainland China, business schools became very, very, very important. And they were all using American textbooks. They were learning the Harvard case method, right? And they were not doing research the way we do. So I decided with my colleagues, we created workshops for Chinese business school professors to come to Hong Kong, 8 days of solid training on research methods, empirical research methods. So we did that for a whole 4 years, okay? So after that, we have a kind of 150, 160 young professors. They were recommended by their dean, so they were very bright and influential. So they went back, they started their own empirical research, they started a PhD program, introduced empirical research as part of the PhD program. So when that happened, and then at the same time, a lot of Western scholars are studying China. In fact, the earliest best work about China were by sociologists. Okay, people like Victor Ni and Andy Walder, Guthrie, they were writing a lot of research on China. So I know there's Western interest on China. Chinese scholars are interested in doing research on the international stage. So we decided to create this platform called International Association for Chinese Management Research, to create a platform for exchange of research ideas, results and also form a potential collaboration. So my career then began to, a small part of research, a big part began to work on this institution building work. And we also created a journal to publish Chinese management research in the Management Organization Review. So while that is happening, I was observing something else is happening globally in our field. Chinese scholars were working on projects that are mostly, they look to literature for questions, right? So they were studying problems that's in the literature, theories that's in the literature, methods that's in the literature. So pretty soon, Chinese data, Western theory, Western questions, and Western methods. So that this kind of tendency moving towards the North American paradigm was happening with Chinese research. And then this is happening not only in China, we know this is happening in other emerging economies as well. Eastern Europe, Africa, India, you know, name. So this, and even Europeans or Western Europeans are moving towards North American model, right? We know the Tilburg is known for published successfully in American journals, right? So James March was the first one to observe this homogenization tendency moving towards the North American model. And I observed it worldwide. So I began to write about this problem. So my research then turned to be research on research. So I began to write these questions of homogenization tendency, the need for indigenous research, high quality indigenous research. We need to contextualize our theories, our methods, our constructs. So I was doing a lot of writing in those areas. And then I was asked to write a paper for AMJ's 50th anniversary. So I decided to write about this problem. And the title of the paper was From Homogenization to Pluralism in International Management Research in the Academy and Beyond. So that's basically, it's actually my 6th program of research, but it's research on research. It's all kind of philosophy, science type of questions. So I write about, you know, we need to do social responsible research. We need to pay attention to other stakeholders and more than shareholders. And then we write about that we need to pay attention to both rigor and relevance and the homogenization problem. So that's basically my newest work, the research writing piece. And of course, my institution work is in creating a new platform for global attention to responsible research. We can talk about that later. So that's how the context really influences. I really respond to what I see to be in the world, the need are, and it usually affects me. I feel an injustice. I feel something's not right. And then I want to write about it, talk about it, and then do something about it. So that's my academic career in the last 15, 20 years is all about action research.
Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting experience, which I think make you very different compared to some of our other scholars. Yeah. You are really kind of the academic entrepreneur, and then back to even think about like back to early or mid of 1990s, you moved from the US and back to Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong have even bigger influence in this like mainland China and do this institutional building stuff and encourage local scholars to do some indigenous research and not just about the literature itself, and try to address the important business questions in their community. Right. Right. In terms of, when you think about the last several decades, right? You do the both research and institution. So, is there any maybe one of the most challenging moments, or some of the very success story that you would like to share with us, or especially you want to share with some of the junior scholars? In addition to this, like, you know, how to deal with like the reviewers, and is there any other challenge? You know.
Well, I mean, the review process is always challenging, and I like to. I think I was Joanne Oxley mentioned the other day Not that reviewers are always right, but if the reviewers have a problem with your idea, with the way you present it, it's probably you didn't present it well. So you always have to not externalize, external attribution, and look at how I can change the way I present this idea so that it could be understood by the reviewers. Okay, so that would be on the reviewer side. I guess I'm a really lucky person. I at every stage of my life, I never really see difficulties. I think that's probably the way I grew up. Just like difficulties is part of life. When problems come, you solve it, and you can also have a collaboration with co-authors. One co-author was sitting on a revision for 6 months. I sent calls, sent fax, sent email, everything, just nothing would get the person's attention. And then I even considered, should I just drop the person and just move on without the person? I said, but no, I can't. I mean, that's just not right to do. So I just patiently waited, continuing at least one way of contact a week for about 6 months. Finally, the person said, okay, Anne, I know I've been lowering, but I'm ready now. So that turned. So patience, understanding, because sometimes you might encounter in your life situations where it's out of your control, right? So normally we say, well, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty. I'll get back to you in 2 months, 3 months. But this person decided to ignore me. So that's kind of one of the difficulty that I was frustrating for me, but I somehow managed to overcome that. So I guess my suggestion to junior scholars is that when there's difficulty, just think about, is it something that you can do about it? If you really can, seek advice. And that's always helpful. Once you seek advice, people give you some objective advice, and advise somebody who's really critical and somebody who's not just nice, right? People who are nice are not going to tell you that you really should drop that project. People who are really critical, they have no self-interest in your problem, and that's the best. So yeah, so I'm not sure I can be very helpful in this regard. So
it's very helpful. I think it's like maybe go back to the earlier points you make, that your early life experience actually helps a lot. As for you, literally, all the difficulties could be solved as long as work with the cause, understand the difficulties, and eventually all the difficulties could be solved.
Well, not that extreme.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like I have 2 projects. Both of them are field experiments. One is a simulation experiment. One is a company experiment. So I'm a high self-efficacy. I believe I can do everything, anything, which is also one of my challenges. But so I did that. I spent 1 year on one project, 1 year on the other project. And when a paper sends out, people say, this is, your manipulation's not right. They just don't trust the results. So I don't think at that time I even seek any advice. I look at it and I double check my research methods book, and I say, they're right. So I just throw it away and just move on. So sometimes you have to admit defeat and just move on, and feel bad about it for about half an hour, and then just move on. Don't think about it anymore. To new things. And that ability to to pick up and just restart is very important for our field, because not all projects are successful. I really believe every one of us have projects that failed, and we just have to not lament about it and just move on.
Mm-hmm. It's great, thanks. So before we open the conversations of all the Q&As from our audience, and let me ask you maybe one of the last questions is there any unanswered questions from your perspective that you think it's important and scholars should further pursue it, or some related advice for our junior colleagues before we open the floor to everybody?
Okay, that's a very good question, because I get asked a lot. Professor Tsui, what should I study? Every young scholar in China asks me this question. So my answers are always, think about the world today. What do you care about? Okay. And someone said, well, I don't know, there are too many things. I said, well, there must be one thing that you care about. Okay, all right. So if they really couldn't think of anything, now I have another answer. I said, well, go to some of the websites and look for a list of grand challenges. Okay. The Academy of Engineering has a list of grand challenges, the Academy of Public Administration, the National Academy Management. We don't have a list of grand challenges, but we have AMJ Grand Challenge special issue that's full of papers also. So I would say if you really can't think of anything else, then go to the United Nations website and look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, there's something for everybody. I mean, if you can find a problem that you care about on that list, I have to ask you, who are you? What world do you live in, right? So yeah, so that's a really good place to start. And then you would think about, well, these are too big. Well, yeah, well, they're not too big. You can always divide it up into small pieces, right? So if everything else fails, I'll say, well, think about this year's economic Nobel Prize winner, okay? I'm not asking you to aspire to be Nobel Prize winners. If you do, that's wonderful. but at least you can look at them and think about, they did actually very mundane research. They care about this problem of poverty in developing economies. So the three of them spent 20 years to focus on alleviating poverty. Emerging economies, India, Africa, South America, you name it, okay? They spent 20 years to work on public health, early education, agriculture, and all they did were field experiments, okay? Randomized control experiments, okay? If you look at what they did, we can do all of that. We know those methods, right? Why don't we do that, right? So you don't have to say, I'm going to spend 20 years to work on my dissertation. I'll say, I'll start with one. Poverty alleviation in Mississippi. Water problem in Detroit. Racial injustice in Alabama, right? Pick a problem you care about, go and understand it. Understanding the problem is very important before you can find the right solution for it, okay? And I'm afraid the literature, it really is not helpful for these, okay? So you gotta think about, all right, there are other disciplines, and many problems are multidisciplinary in nature. So talk to people in humanities, in political science, economics, even in philosophy, okay, in sociology, to see what they have to say about this problem, right? And then you pick and choose one idea that can potentially reduce poverty, improve education, whatever, okay? Do field experiments. That's what we need to do more in our field, okay? In companies and in cities, okay? Help business to help solve the poverty problem in any city. So that's just so much to do now that the world is in such a mess, okay? We really have, you know, and science is really the solution to many problems. And we have to think about, I mean, I'm an academic freedom person. I really value the academic freedom, choosing what we want to study, but freedom comes responsibility as well. So we have a responsibility to give back something to somebody with the salary that we are paid and the time we have to do research. It's got to be more than just, for me, having another paper in my CV. And that just doesn't seem like we can afford to do that much longer, because we have to self-motivate ourselves to do things that matter for society. So that's my...
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for challenging us and ask the big questions and be relevant and to contribute, not only the academic per se,
sorry
but also the society.
But I care a lot about we make a difference in our way. And I know young people really want to make a difference. Now, we just this morning, I saw an email from the Impact Scholar community and other humanistic management community. All of them are young people are crying out, we want to do research that matters, that can make impact on society. And we just need to people like me in my generation, we just have to help create a structure to make some changes in the structure to let that potential be realized, to release and take away the straitjacket of this journalists, all that thing. It's just not productive. So, but there's lots of hope. Things are changing.
Thanks. Thank you. So before we open the floor to everybody, and can we take a screenshot? Can I make the following request? For those who haven't opened your web camera, could you open it so that we can see your face, and no matter where you are, and then, but at this moment, we are in this small Zoom room. Please switch on your web camera, and let's take let's take a couple more seconds, and then please open your web camera, and then Shelby, are you going to help us to
do
the screenshotting? Okay, yeah, please.
I'll count to 3, and that way we know when everybody should be looking at the camera. All right, so 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, super.
Thank you. So let's get into the second part, and I've seen a few questions already put in our chat box. So if you don't mind, perhaps I will ask you to raise your questions, and should we start with Shelby? Do you have a question, am I right? Could you ask a question by yourself, or should I? Oh, okay, please.
Yeah, so thank you, Anne, for an amazing talk so far. It's been very inspiring, and I'm really grateful for you taking the time out to chat with us. So I have 2 sort of related questions. The first one was, to your point about taking inspiration from current events and looking at what's happening out there in society and trying to address those issues. I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the current in the US and how it's affecting Asians and Asian Americans working here. And the second sort of related question to that is, as a senior female scholar of Asian descent who accomplished so much institutional building and attained such prominent leadership positions during a time when, it wasn't easy, I'm sure. What challenges, if any, did you encounter? What advice would you give to junior scholars from different backgrounds who follow a similar career path?
Okay, Shelby, thank you for the questions. I understand your second question with no problem, but I have difficulty with the first question. So if you would mind repeating your first question again for me, I appreciate it.
Yes, not a problem. Coming here from a farm, so apologies for the technology. So the question was about the current climate in the U.S.
Current climate.
Yeah. So and it's specifically the idea that.
You mean the research climate, or you mean the research climate, or our
more of a political climate? So like
political climate.
So given the rise of a lot of racist acts against Asians and Asian Americans living in the West, given your work looking at this, what kind of thoughts do you have? Do you think that this is something that we as business scholars, management scholars, can put their role in, anything related to that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. The public health pandemic really reminds me the importance of leadership. Okay, I mean, it's just the way the leadership is at a national level is just incredible. I mean, not only one person, but lots of people. And I think about business as well. Some business was very nice to their employees. Some business just laid off, right? So for me, as a management scholar, what attracted to me is this, I call it responsible leadership, that without responsible leadership, there's no value. A different kind of value is driving the decisions. Okay, so for me personally, luckily, actually, I am interested in responsible leadership question for some time now, right? So we have a special issue in MOR. So it becomes just so real. Oh my gosh, we have this issue which came about in December before pandemic, and now becomes even more important. So that's one thing. And then the second thing, as I said, racial, ethnic tension, personally, that's very personal. Each person reacts to it individually. But as a scholar, it really tells me that we have to do research on racial injustice in the firm, in society. I mean, that's the topic. We know how to do research on that, working with our colleagues in psychology, sociology, even in political science and philosophy, and business ethics, okay? So again, it reminds me that if I'm your age and my junior class, I mean, if I have papers I'm working on today that's on problems that has nothing to do with the society today, I really have the question, do I want to continue to work on it? Or should I pick up a problem that I really should get? And I would not worry about whether it's publishable or not, whether it's going to help my tenure or not, because if you can offer some solution to a real problem, the journals will publish it and you'll be valued. So in other words, just pick an important problem that touch your heart. And then, because research is difficult, right? It's very demanding. If you work on a problem that's not meaningful to you, it's very hard to sustain, right? So you got to work on something that you personally identify, have passion about. I mean, this is not cliche. For me, this is real. And also it's a problem that potentially can help the society to be better. Why not? Okay, so that's my first answer. And the second question is about, let me paraphrase because it's been a few minutes. Let me paraphrase what you were asking. It's about the institution building work that I have engaged in. What challenges did I encounter, right? Yeah, so my institution building work, it really starts with AMJ. That's a big service. I was in Hong Kong studying a new department as a new department head. We're so busy. I don't really know why I want to do it because so I have to consult my colleagues. Okay. So the challenge was that I was overseas. That was this data sharing pre-cloud. So every week they send me a box of Federal Express papers this high that we have to process it, right? So that's sort of, you have to overcome the logistics difficulty of doing EMJ. So that was one thing that came to mind. But the starting a new journal, MOR, was another major challenge because we're competing for papers. We're competing for good papers. As a new journal, it's very difficult to start a new journal. So at the end of the first issue, I was begging senior scholars to write for us, okay? I mean, James March wrote the first piece in the first issue. That was not too difficult. He was such a nice man that he said, oh, sure, I'll write for you. But everything after that, it was just really difficult. So in the second year, I almost wanted to let it go, just sort of kill it. And then I always, before I make a decision, I always try to consult with people. So I talked to John Child. Some of you may know John Child. And he said, and hang in there, we can make it work. I said, John, if you promise you stay with me and don't leave, then I have the courage to continue. So he did. He stayed with us for about 4 to 5 years, okay? So that's the second challenge. And I'll give you a third one, and then I'll talk about how junior scholar, whether or not you should do something like this. The third challenge is responsible research, which is the most challenging of all, because this project is for the whole field, global. is for all business schools, okay, is try to change the institution now of publishing in the top 50 journals in the 5 disciplines, okay? People who are successful don't want to change. What do you mean by, get away the journal? What do you mean by we don't count, we have to read papers? That's too hard, okay? Reading is easier. Let the reviewers decide, but they forgot that the top journals, only 20% of paper got cited. 80% don't get any citations, 1 or 2 or 3. So you cannot equate a journal publication is a quality work. That is just not true, all right? So that is the kind of problem we have in our field, that we're trying to get people's mindset to say, we just cannot count 8 journals, because that's not fair to junior faculty. That's not fair to the field of our development, and that's not fair to businesses that's counting on us to produce some knowledge, and that's not fair to the students that we have to teach about what is the important new knowledge for your career and for your future leadership, right? So something's fundamentally wrong about our system, and this RRBM is trying to change that, okay? But we're making progress because the journals are changing. AMJ, bless his heart, Laszlo, right, had this editorial say, from less interesting to less important. That's his April editorial. It's a strong signal, say, work on problems that's important, not work on problems that's only interesting from literature, right? So that's the journals are changing, right? AACSB accreditation is going to ask for impact data of your school in terms of research and teaching. That's coming down. Next time your school get reviewed for accreditation, the school has to produce documentation on what's the impact of your faculty's research on society. Okay, so that's coming. And finally, let me just say, this is not for junior scholars, okay? This is institution building work has to be reserved for people, old people like me, right? And I am lucky because I have been a journal editor, I've been a president of AOM, I've created associations, I've published some decent research. So I feel like all my life I was prepared to do this job, this responsible research, because if I don't have that background, nobody's going to listen to me, right? The reason we have this whole community of the founding team is 24 scholars worldwide. They're all past association presidents, journal editors in accounting, finance, operations, management, and so forth, right? The reason they would come together because they all believe. And the reason they trust me that this is a problem we should solve because I have some background to offer. So I say, if you care about many things in the world, your first thing you should care about is do good research on important problems, then earn your reputation to be a high quality scholar, then you'll be asked to be editor, you'll be asked to run for officer, and then think about your time. Some of our scholars never do that. Okay, like Jeff Pfeffer, he just doesn't do these things, but he's got a brain that we don't want him to do anything else except to write papers, right? So that's a good division of labor. Okay, so if you're one of those, research is your thing. Keep doing it. We won't blame you for not doing your service because your service is to create good knowledge for the rest of us, right? So that's so do your basic research well, teach well, then when you're ready, care for our institution, then you can offer your service later on, okay? Sorry for a long answer.
Thanks. Jiao, could you ask your questions by yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Anne. This is really, really fantastic, and I love the compassion you showed us and demonstrated for us, thinking back to your presidential address in 2012 at AOM. So I think listening to you, I think all of these choices you made, right? I would love to know a little bit about also your thinking process, right? So a lot of these major undertakings, for example, when you decided to go back to HKUST, you had a very stable, you know, you're already made at UC Irvine, and California is a lovely place. So I just wanted to get a sense of, you know, what are you trading off, and how did you make those decisions? Because I think those will be very, very helpful for all of us to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, Zhao, thank you for that question. That's a very good question. It was not a difficult decision, actually. I was tenured, I was associate professor, and of course, they offered me a professorship to go there. I was from Hong Kong, right? I spent 12 years in Hong Kong, primary, secondary school. So I thought, well, yeah, maybe I could do something for Hong Kong. So it's just very naive. I'll do something for Hong Kong. And then I talked to my colleagues at UC Irvine, my dean, about this. He said, well, you can take a 2-year leave. We have official policy 2-year leave. So I said, oh, good, then I'll go for 2 years, do what I can. And then at the end of the middle second year, I need to decide, of course, how can you build a first-class department in 2 years? It's literally impossible. So I decided to stay and quit my job at UC Irvine. And so there's not a very complicated thinking process behind it. I just thought, you know, I've started this, the job's not done, and I should finish it. I mean, you know, my sense of responsibility, my sense of I want to do something for Hong Kong. I couldn't start it and drop it, right? So that's and that kind of very, you know, it reminds me of the same thinking process I used when I was deciding to become academic instead of going back to company. I have this naive thinking, oh, maybe I can help more people. And say, oh, maybe I can help Hong Kong. But as it turns out, I stayed for 8 years, okay? But what happened those 8 years is it really changed my life totally, because I'm not a traditional academic anymore, right? I quickly go from a traditional OB HR researcher, become international management. Okay, so I end up, all my research is published in traditional journals still, and I been published in JIPS, but I studied Chinese phenomena and I created an association. So AIB decided to make me a fellow. So I was just thinking, how this all happened to me, you know? The only thing I can think about is when you feel like something is the right thing to do, moves your heart, just do it. Don't be so calculative, because if you do a good job, if it's a good thing to do, and it's not all for yourself, good things going to happen to you. So.
Thanks. Thank you. Next, Nina Tan. Could you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Hi, and thank you again for sharing. I identified with a lot of the values you grew up with as well. I'm curious about when you told us the story of how you fell in love with research during your PhD. What sparked your love for research during that time, such that you didn't want to go back to your industry job?
Yeah. Thank you. That's a good question. Nothing dramatic. You know, I always liked research, but I didn't know I liked it so much. My undergraduate, I did an honors thesis, which is an experiment, and try to figure out why babies cry when they see strangers. That was kind of my first research project. And then I did my master's at Minnesota. We had a choice of coursework or do a thesis. So I chose to do thesis. I did my research on job satisfaction. And then when I was working at the first job, actually it was before control data, I was working at University of Minnesota hospitals, and I was working with the nurses about nursing turnover problems. So I write a paper about nursing turnover, try to estimate the cost of turnover. And I sent that paper, so I sent that paper into American Hospital Association Journal, JHA, right? Journal of American Hospital Association. and it was acceptance first submission. So, so it was all my research kind of been really good. And then after I went to UCLA, I had the fortune of Charles O'Reilly was there for the fall semester. And so he was not teaching, he was ready to go up to Berkeley. So my mentor at that time was Anderson. He said, John Anderson, he said, well, take an independent study with Charles O'Reilly. So, you know, Charles O'Reilly is such a good researcher. You know, you talk to him, you know, his heart is just kind of sparkles and he's just going all over the place. So just a conversation with him just inspired me about, you know, solving problems and puzzles. And then I was working on a project with him, and we presented it, and we sent it to JAP, and the JAP come back and said, fatal flaw, common method variance. So Charles O'Reilly said the paper is dead. He just literally threw it into the trash can. So I learned about that. This is great. We spend all the time doing a project. We can just throw it away. So in other words, research is something that you don't have to always be successful. I mean, that you just find the problems you like, work on it, and also just do the best. Make sure you don't have this fatal flaw again, you know. So in other words, the whole first semester was taking a few classes, all being socialized by Charles O'Reilly. And then the next semester, our mentor, John Anderson, took a group of students up to Berkeley to listen to Jeff Pfeffer, because Jeff doesn't travel. He would never travel to give a seminar. If you have luck to get him, that's unusual, okay? So John wanted us to listen to Jeff Pfeffer. So he brought 6 students, paid for our airfare. We went up to see Jeff Pfeffer and listen to a seminar. So that kind of first year treatment made me realize that academic life is really lots of fun, you know? You can just go to places and you can work on projects. If it doesn't work, no problem, work on a second project. So it's just nothing but fun. So of course my dissertation was fun, you know, it was really, so it was easy. I don't have finding a problem, question problem. I don't have data problem, you know, and I have to collect data. We have to go follow up, get questionnaires back. I collect a 3-round paper. And I have a friend who would get up at 5 o'clock to make phone calls to the East Coast for me. You know, it was a blast. So having a good environment the first year is really important, okay? So I don't know whether I answered your question, Zhao, but that's what you triggered me to think about talking.
Thank you. Next questions, Stephen, would you like to ask your question by yourself?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Anne, for sharing your very inspiring story with us. Now I have 2 questions, just listening to what you answer. The first one is, how many projects have you thrown away when you said research project, if you are not, you may not be always successful, that you throw away projects. So that's what I want to know about, how many projects that you actually throw away, that you know they're not successful. And returning to my first question that I want to ask you, you mentioned that nowadays there are many problems, important problems that we cannot start off with literature review, that a lot of answers we cannot get from what we know as the body of knowledge. I can't agree with you anymore on this, because quite recently I work with my PhD students on artificial intelligence. So of course, the way we are trained, we start off with a lit review. We review the literature and we draw conceptual maps, and then we try to identify the research gap. And once we started with this, we noticed we couldn't even do this, because artificial intelligence is so multidisciplinary, and we don't even have a lot of dominant theories or whatever that we can draw on. So I want to ask you more in this kind of important problems for us, for managers. How should we try to tackle this from an academic perspective? How should we start off with tackling these problems? Is inductive research what you are hinting at?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so basically your second question is about new problems. There's no existing theories that can inform those questions, and they are multidisciplinary in nature. So how does one begin to work on them, right?
Yeah, because this is how we trained in our PhD program.
And how do you
train the literature? Yeah, that's what I mean as well. Yes.
Okay.
Or even for myself. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the. I mean, if I had to start today as a young scholar, I think I'm going to have to take different set of classes. First of all, I don't think that set of classes I was taught is going to be enough. If you want to work in AI, you better go to engineering school to take some classes from there, for example, right? So that's really very the technical aspect of it is important. But there are different kinds of topics in AI. There's also an ethics issue, there's a management issues, there's worker AI interface issues. So yeah. So let me answer your first question first. How many projects have I thrown away? Quite a few. Beginning with my dissertation, I had two major papers I wanted to write and a number of other side papers. So one is the one on testing the main hypothesis about the managers who have gained reputation with all three groups. They were promoted more often, they get higher salary increases and so forth. So that established a reputational concept. And that was published in BHTP. And then I have another paper is about antecedents of reputational effectiveness. That paper, I sent it to ASQ, got a, I don't remember if that's reject or first rejection, but it was pretty quick. And basically it's a weak theory, very weak theory. So I looked at it, and I thought about it. I said, yeah, I'm not even convinced myself there's some common method variance problem. Then there's social structural determinants of reputational effectiveness as a basic idea. So I just wasn't strong enough in theory at that time. So I said, okay, I'm not going to bother with it. It was published in the best proceedings of the Academy conference that year. But if I had reworked it, it probably would end up in some journal, right? But I decided I just don't want to spend, because I was taught that if a project is not going to be the best project, if you're not going to be proud of that paper, drop it. So that's extreme, yeah.
See, I have a follow-up question on that. We all know whatever we publish, it kind of constitutes the identity of ourselves. We see people, some they publish on various kinds of journals, focusing on one topic. So they build up an identity of themselves. Right. Some others, they throw the projects away and just publish in the top tier journals. And of course, like for example, 80% of their papers, they cannot see the light. Right. So how would you comment on this?
That's the answer.
Strategy.
The answer is simple. As a social scientist, I come back to that question. We have the identity. Our identity is not a paper production machine. Our identity is a social scientist trying to solve some problem in society, in business. Okay, so we cannot be experts on everything. We only can be experts on something, right? Let's come back to your question. What do I care about? Okay, and your interest may change over time, like me. My interest changes over time many times, but I began interested in managerial effectiveness, right? If I'm a student today, I probably won't look at that topic. That's not an important topic anymore. There are more important topics there. So my answer is look at a problem that you care a lot about. Think about it as a program of research. You're going to commit to the next 5 to 10 years to work on it. Something else can come along, but you don't want to invest in a project, just one paper and then you're in, because your reputation is built on multiple papers. Okay, so a program of research, is this problem big enough for me to carry a program research for a number of years? And I never write one paper on a topic. I always write minimally 3 or 4 papers on it before my name will be associated with something people recognize. So that's that. Yeah. I am not shy about advising that to all students. I mean, the current approach of, you know, one paper this topic, one paper that topic, you're a jack of all trades, you're an expert on nothing. It's just not a social scientist. Yeah, so you want to be expert for something. Okay, in the natural sciences, people are expert of one thing. But for us, we can be expert of several things. So
thanks for sharing. It's great for me to start off a winter morning. I'm in Sydney at the moment.
Thank you.
To know your story. Thank you.
So next questions, Jing Tan, would you like to ask?
Oh, hey,
yes.
Professor, I am Jing.
Are you in Hawaii also?
Sorry?
Are you in Hawaii also?
No, it's just a virtual background. Actually, I'm now in West Lafayette. So I was in my first year PhD in Purdue.
Okay.
So actually, I am so impressed by your middle managers topic. You talk about this dissertation story before, right? So actually, I think I have some similar backgrounds with you, and also I want to work on the middle managers topic, but sorry, I didn't have the time to go over your dissertation, that paper. So yeah, so I can only like ask you some question like, so do you think that middle manager topic is still promising nowadays? Because yeah, when I want to do this kind of topic, my advisor said there are some limitations if I want to work on this topic. First about the data, and second about like, there are only tiny group like people who are still working on it.
Yeah.
What kind of suggestions you may give to
Well, when I was a student, the whole industrial setup, the economy is different from today. When I was a student, big corporations is the thing, right? So there are lots of middle managers, okay? Now, the world has changed. There are not as many middle managers. Your supervisor is right. Because think about e-commerce, they have is all professional workers, right? Who are their managers, right? It's not so clear, right? Yeah. So instead of say this rank, maybe you can ask yourself, you're interested in a manager's job, right? Okay, so, but that's also too vague, right? Manager of what industry, for example, right? Of what industry, manager in which kind of social cultural context, okay? So a middle managers managing in a gig economy versus is online e-commerce versus SMEs, right? Production service SMEs, right? They're all different in nature. So change your focus a little bit to look at the problems that these managers may have direct linkage to. So in other words, you cannot understand a manager's job in a vacuum, because I could at that time, because middle managers is a real job, right? They're all, you know, R&D, marketing, administration, they're this heavy layer, okay? And that layer is basically gone today, okay? So maybe you can look at SMEs is the largest producers of jobs in the world, okay? The small firms. So there are first-line supervisors, there's the owner, and then all these director of finance, director of sales, director of manufacturing, all these directors, they're middle managers basically. They're called executives, but they're basically middle managers, okay? So maybe focus on those, and how do they actually, in their tension within the firm, trying to piece this one boss. I think about SMEs, we only have one boss, right? And then all the workers. So what are the nature of their jobs? So in other words, think about managers in a context, not in vacuum, okay? And then look at the context that you're interested in, and then ask whether or not there's something about these middle managers that I like to know something about. So what is it that you want to find out about? What's the question, okay? And then maybe you can talk to some of them to say, what are the challenges in your job?
Thank you so much.
You need to concretize it a little bit more. Yeah, so it doesn't mean that you cannot study it, but you need to contextualize that question. Okay, I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
So thanks. Go back to your earlier points, right? Put the context into the research question.
Exactly.
Next questions is Xiaowei, Yan Xiaowei around. Could you ask your question? It's very specific, also related to your study, your specific study in the PhD program.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing in both in life and the research. And I think you are really a person with passion and very clear, very clear about what you are looking for. And I appreciate both the two. Now I will start my first year in PhD in 1 or 2 months. And before I go back to the school for study, I have 10 years working experience in HR management in China. So that I have a little poor in the foundational research skills and theories, but I'm really interested in it. Now my study is aiming to the OBHR, maybe focus on the platform HR management or some other topics according to my professor and the team. Could you give me some advice in this condition? Thank you very much. And in this special area, take care of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Xiaowei, very much for your care. So you have a rich, a really rich HR experience, 10 years in China. Is that in one industry or is it in multiple industries? I'm just curious to see what's
in many different industries.
Okay, so that breadth is very helpful. Yeah. So and HR is a very important field. There's a, we have, I think, where are you going to school? I forgot, I didn't, where are you going to start your PhD?
Also in China, Shanghai.
Oh, in Shanghai. Okay. All right. Okay. So you want to probably focus on the human resource aspect. And I guess I'm not sure what's your question. If you feel strongly about the HR field, then you should focus on what are the challenges of this field in China. I know Chinese companies are, there's a very active group of HR executives that get together. They have a WeChat platform. So HR is a very important field in business. And also there's certainly a critical mass of researchers in HR in China as well. So I would, my student actually, Kevin Wang did a dissertation on human resources. So I suppose just read the literature, don't forget your experience. And I would not throw that away. You have such rich 10 years experience, draw on them. You probably have lots of network, lots of friends. They can potentially be very helpful to you when you're ready to do a dissertation. So define a problem that's meaningful to them, and I'm sure you're going to get help from them, because HR community is dying for help in terms of knowledge to help how to manage HR function better in China, in Chinese firms. So yeah, just focus, keep your focus, and don't get distracted by other things. You're going to have lots of distractions when you get into the program. So when you have advisors wanting to bring you to field trips, try to choose an advisor that you really like their project, and don't choose it just because this advisor pays you better than another advisor. Don't do that.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
It's great. There's a couple of questions that participants key in when they register for the session. I'm not sure whether they are in this room right now, but there's this one question which I think it's important. You sort of mentioned this earlier. It's, research is at some point of time it's like co-author with your friends. And so the question that these participants ask is, what advice would you give to the junior scholars on how to choose a co-author? Because eventually it's going to a teamwork, right? And then who is the partner, how working style, etc. will be important.
Right. Well, different people give different advice. Mine's may be a little different, and I use a metaphor of, as a junior scholar, you're learning to do research. If you want to learn how to play tennis, you find the best coach you can. So as a junior scholar, when you do research, always find the co-author who's better than you. Better than you in methods, in theory, construction, in writing, okay? So, but probably overall research experience is important. So that would be my first advice. The second is, make sure that the person is a fair player. You check out the reputation of the person. Do they carry their share? All right. So somebody may be really successful, lots of publications, but if they have a reputation for some, especially I know in China, some advisors papers, they got tons of papers, the students write them. So I don't mean to, this is not very nice of me to say that, but as a student, I'm trying to think in terms of student junior authors. For your well-being, I really feel that you should choose carefully who you work with as collaborators, but develop your own skills. You can't lean on your mentors only for so long. You have to make sure that you have the skills to be independent eventually. So that means if you have to take one more methods class, do that. If it means that even when you're assistant professor, you can still go to another department to take a class on a particular problem or theory, okay? So sharpen your skills. That's very important, because when you lean on somebody to do the analysis for you, and if that person is wrong, your reputation is on the line. And if the paper got lucky enough to be published, and for example, I know there was one scholar who very distinguished, he trusted the co-author, there was a problem, the paper got rejected, you know, not rejected, retracted after it's published. So protect your reputation, build your own skills, lean on senior people, senior collaborators to teach you. And then, see, I work with Charles O'Reilly. He was my mentor, right? 2 papers, that's it. I never work with him again. I feel like I need to be independent, okay? So that's a junior scholar. And senior people really like to work with junior people too, because you have fresh ideas, you're diligent, right? They only contribute their idea and maybe write this first 5 pages, right? So, but that's good division of labor. And it's fair, but they have to do their part. Okay, so I probably said more than I said.
Thanks. Thank you. Co-working, learning, just like a joint venture, right? So we have to learn over the time and learn from partners, learn from others, and care about the reputations. Jiao, you have a following up question?
If only there's time. Okay,
yes.
So I think, so I guess for the other question I had for Anne is for the RRBM project, major undertaking, responsible researching business and management. So you already talked about how do you bring together academics from various disciplines to do this together. One thing I've also kind of experienced it's an honor to be a finalist last year for the award, as well as having reviewed for it this year. I noticed that there's also engagement with the practitioners, right? So you ask them to review, ask the managers to actually read those articles and give their own ratings. So I'm curious about your experiences doing that, and what are, what do the practitioners, what are their responses?
Yeah. Yeah, this is the RBM award in collaboration with IACMR. It's not easy to find practitioners who's willing to read academic papers. It's really not easy. But we were lucky through networks, through friends, we were able to reach most of them, with the exception one or two, most of them have PhDs. So they're working in business. Okay, some of them work in HR, some work in the line area, some are executives who went back to get a DBA, so they understand research. So we're very lucky to be able to put together a team of 10 of them. Some in China, some in US, a few in Europe, okay? So they already prepared, they understand academic paper. So one thing that we make it easier for them, because they get to read the paper after the academic review. So it's already passed a rigor test, right? And also these papers were published. So they already passed previously the rigor test. So they have a second review by a panel of academic reviewers. So we ask them only to read for the usefulness of the ideas, okay? So responsible research is about research that produces both credible and useful knowledge, okay? So those two dimensions are key to it. So they would be looking at, I say, look at the introduction, okay, session to get the main idea what they're trying to find, and look at maybe the discussion conclusions, where they usually repeat the results. So you can skip all the methods and the results session. So most of them do that, and some of them actually read the whole paper. They write a whole review. So they, I'll share you a couple stories. Most of them did it for me again the second year, which means that they find the task pretty interesting. And one review is an executive for Citibank in London, and the paper is about maternity leave, short leave, 3 months versus 12 months, right? So talk about short leave, you go back to work 12 months, out of sight, out of mind. People, when they go back to work, they have to restart, okay? So their career is slower. So this study talks about companies actually engage this long maternity leave, put them on committees, so they are like not part-time, but they are at least involved with some kind of activity within the company. So these people, these maternity leavers who are on committees, some kind of engagement with the company, when they come back, their career, they're equally perceived to be promotable, to be just as productive and so forth. So this executive saw this paper and said, we have a maternity leave, we have the problem too. So she took the idea, give it to the HR executives, let's review our maternity leave, see what we can do to make sure that we don't lose our women who went on leave, make sure that they don't suffer negative consequences for taking long leaves. So that's one executive. Another one is a finance VP who had a DBA. He was looking at this paper for first-time workers in India, these women workers. So first-time women workers in India. And this project is about this Indian woman, the first-time worker, there's a high turnover rate, okay, within the first 3 months. So they try to find out why they left so early and so forth. And then they did an experiment to find out if they give them sort of pre-job training in terms of professional skills, understanding work, interaction with peers, career progression. So these realistic job preview with a little bit of a professional skill training and career planning, turnover substantially declined. Okay, so this executive, he worked in Saudi Arabia. They're starting to hire first-time women workers in Saudi Arabia. And they had the same problem. They said, we can't keep these women. They make enough money to buy an iPhone. They say, I'm leaving, bye-bye. I make enough money. All I need is money to buy an iPhone. So they're not professionally oriented. So he said, we designed a program just like the study said about. And 3 months later, I saw him, actually 6 months later, I said, how's it going? He said, oh, our turnover reduced, just like the paper said. So you think this wonderful thing is with executive involvement, I hope through this group, if we can continue, they can be our speakers, spokesperson that business research actually help our business right away. Okay, so that's the beauty of that award. So thanks for asking that question.
It's a great innovation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I'm going to reserve the last question, or maybe the most important question, for Samina to ask.
Oh no.
One question. No, they're fun questions, Anne. So
No, and fun and also most important.
I selfishly want to ask one serious question and then a bunch of fun questions quickly. So my first serious question is, what is something you know now that you wish you had known as a junior scholar?
Oh, wow, that is a very, very good question. I would not rush to graduate so soon. I did my PhD in 3 years. I wish I'd taken more classes in sociology and philosophy. And I wish I'd taken more philosophy science classes, because that really helped me. And I taught myself in recent years. So, so all my writing is because I took a philosophy science class at Notre Dame in the fall of 2014. So it's quite recent. So that's what I would do. I would take more classes, not rush to graduate. So when students say, oh, Professor Tsui, I really want to graduate so soon, I said, don't rush it. In the long, you have a whole career. If you take 1 or 2 more years to well prepare yourself, pay off, be tremendous.
Yeah, that's true. That time never comes back.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wonderful, wonderful knowledge for us to all hold on to. Okay, so now I have some speed questions for you, Anne, that are fun questions, okay?
Okay.
What is your favorite dessert?
Oh, they have more than one. Can I tell you all?
Sure.
You know, I came to America in 1970. And I fell in love in New York. I fell in love with cheesecake. And I went to Minnesota. I was working in a cafeteria in Minnesota as an undergraduate student. I fell in love with banana cream pie.
The underlying common factor is sugar.
Sugar, sugar. And then later on, I love root beer float.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You
now
know,
my latest is tiramisu.
Oh, tiramisu. That, you know, in all the scholars we have asked, I think tiramisu is the running winner right now.
Is that right? Oh, yeah, I'm in the group.
Something, I wonder. So, okay, you've probably traveled the world. What is your favorite city?
No, I can't have many, but I'll just say one. Currently, my favorite city is Vatican.
The Vatican.
Yeah. It's got culture, it's got history of religion, you know, my faith, and it's just a beautiful city. I love Italians, they're so warm. Mm-hmm. I only know one Italian word though, bambino, that's all I know. I don't know any other Italian word, but yeah, Vatican's my favorite city right now.
I hope to see it one day.
Yeah.
Do you like to read fiction or nonfiction when it's not scholarly work?
Well, currently, my interest changed over time to currently, I love biographies and spiritual books. Okay. So my favorite biography, I can tell you 3. I love them, and they're written by different people. But the one biography that I love is Walter Isaacson, who wrote Einstein, his life and his work, and life is his universe. And that's absolutely my favorite. Most of my PhD students have it. And I love reading about Mother Teresa, about Gandhi, you know. In my spiritual book, I love Thomas Merton. I don't know if you know Thomas Merton. I love his books.
I'm keeping a personal list because I ask every scholar.
Oh yeah. Oh, you share that list with me. I
will. Yeah. And one thing, you know, you have done so many things, and what I'd love to know is, what do you do to unwind? Or what are your hobbies, that things that relax you?
That's my downfall. I pray a lot. More now because of the pandemic, more time to pray. But my newest hobby, I did pick up, and I'm going to borrow Mike Tushman's answer. Do you remember his answer, Mike Tushman?
I know. I remember he said his grandchildren were one of his, I don't know now. I'm thinking, what else did he say?
Gardening.
Gardening, that's right.
Yeah, so now I'm a gardener. I have a forest in front of my house. a 5 by 10 square plot, very small space. I planted one big tree, 2 vines, 5, 6 desert trees. It's really, really busy. So it's fun.
Now I have to ask, Anne, because you did grow up in a farm when you were young for some time. Are you a natural gardener? Are you good at it?
No, I'm not. I don't like worms. I'm back to nature now. Back to nature. Yeah, no, gardening is very therapeutic. Yeah, once you start watering, cutting, you just forget about everything. It's great.
Well, thank you so much. You know, we had never met, and I had heard so many wonderful things about you, and I'm so glad that you got to share about yourself to all of us, and I think you've been an inspiration to all of us. So on behalf of the division,
the honor is truly mine. I really, really feel very special to be invited and to have this chance to share with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Em. And thank you all to spend 2 hours with us, and have a great summer.
Yes, everybody have a great and safe summer.
And
Stay
safe.
healthy.
Yes.
Stay healthy. Okay. Thank you, Guoli.
Bye.
Thank you, Guoli. Now
Thank
you
you.
can go back to take a nap now.
Now the sun is rising, so I can continue my work.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.